I stood there in our dimly lit dining room, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and nerves. It was our 15th anniversary, and I'd spent the whole day planning this dinner to remind Clarissa how much we still had together, how much I still loved her despite everything. The kids, well, just Marley now since she was the only one still at home, were supposed to be part of this too, a family moment. I'd even gone out and bought a small gift, nothing flashy, just something meaningful. My hand shook a little as I set the tiny box on the table in front of Clarissa, wrapped in simple silver paper with a red ribbon I'd tied myself. I'd practiced what I'd say all morning. 15 years, babe. We've made it through a lot. This is for you. But before I could even get the words out, she glanced at it, then at me, and rolled her eyes so hard I could almost hear them creak. You're still jobless, she said, her voice sharp like a knife cutting through the warm air. You couldn't even afford a decent gift, could you? I froze, my mouth half open, the words I'd rehearsed dying in my throat. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this wasn't about money, that I'd poured my heart into this night. But then Marley piped up from across the table, her teenage sneer cutting deeper than her mother's words. We don't need your cheap box, Dad. Take it and get out. She didn't even look up from her phone, just flicked her fingers like I was some annoying fly buzzing around her perfect life. I stared at them both, my wife, my daughter, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The candles flickered on the table, casting shadows that danced across their faces, and for a second, I couldn't move. My chest tightened, and I thought about yelling, about flipping the table, about demanding they at least open the damn thing and see what I'd done for them. But instead, something else came over me. I laughed. Not a big, loud laugh, just a quiet chuckle that slipped out before I could stop it. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, Clarissa's eyebrows shooting up, Marley finally glancing away from her screen. You sure about that? I asked, keeping my voice steady, almost playful. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, watching them squirm just a little. They didn't know what was in that box. They didn't know what I'd been hiding, what I'd been building while they wrote me off. Clarissa shoved the box back toward me with the back of her hand, like it was trash, and stood up. Get out, she said, her tone flat and final. Marley nodded, smirking like she'd won something. I grabbed the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door without another word. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I heard the lock click behind me. My car was parked in the driveway, the same beat-up sedan I'd been driving for years, and I slid into the driver's seat, the box resting on my lap. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, proof of everything they'd thrown away. I started the engine and pulled out, the streetlights blurring past me as I drove into the night. A week later, my phone started buzzing. Clarissa's name flashed on the screen, then Marley's, over and over. Voicemails piled up, texts too, but I didn't answer. I just sat there in my borrowed room at Uncle Ruben's place, sipping coffee, staring at the little box on the table in front of me. They'd figure it out soon enough. They'd realize what they'd pushed away. And when they did, I'd be ready. Not with anger, not with tears, but with the quiet strength I'd been holding onto all along. I leaned back in the chair, letting the phone vibrate again, and smiled to myself. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 10 years ago, life felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from, and I can still see it so clearly when I close my eyes. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house, the one with the creaky floors and the big bay window, flipping pancakes while Marley giggled at the table, her little hands sticky with syrup. She was 6 then, all wide eyes and messy pigtails, begging me to make the pancakes into Mickey Mouse shapes. Daddy, make his ears bigger, she'd say, and I'd laugh, pouring extra batter just to see her smile. Clarissa would come in, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess from sleep, and she'd wrap her arms around me from behind, kissing my neck like we were still newlyweds. You're spoiling her, she'd tease, but her voice was warm, full of love. Back then, I was somebody, running my own engineering firm, small but growing, pulling in contracts that paid for that house, the vacations, the life we had. I'd built it all from scratch, late nights sketching designs, early mornings pitching to clients, and it felt good to see Clarissa proud of me, to hear Marley brag to her friends about her dad's cool job. I thought we were unbreakable, the three of us, a team against the world. But then the deal went bad. It was one big project, a bridge redesign for the city, and I'd sunk everything into it, every dollar, every hope. When the client pulled out last minute, claiming budget cuts. My firm took the hit. Creditors came knocking, bills piled up, and I had to let my team go, one by one, until it was just me in an empty office, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring. I sold the company for pennies, just enough to keep us afloat, but the damage was done. Clarissa's warmth faded first. She stopped hugging me in the mornings, stopped asking how my day was. "You need to figure this out," she'd say, her voice clipped, like I was a problem she had to solve. I tried. I took freelance gigs, fixed cars on the side, even drove for one of those rideshare apps, but it was never enough. The house went into foreclosure, and we moved into a smaller place, a rental with thin walls and a leaky roof. Marley was 10 by then, and I noticed her pulling away too. She'd roll her eyes when I tried to read her stories at night, muttering, "I'm not a baby, Dad," and I'd laugh it off, thinking it was just growing up. But it wasn't. She started copying Clarissa, parroting her complaints. "Why can't we have nice things anymore?" And I'd catch them whispering sometimes, glancing at me like I was the outsider. I kept hustling, picking up odd jobs, anything to put food on the table, but in their eyes, I wasn't the man I used to be. They didn't see the hours I spent trying to rebuild, the nights I stayed up worrying about how to make it right. They saw the fancy life I'd given them before, the big house, the trips to the coast, the clothes, and they loved that, not me. I'd come home from a long day, hands greasy from fixing someone's engine, and Clarissa wouldn't even look up from her phone. "You smell like oil," she'd say, wrinkling her nose, and Marley would giggle like it was a joke. I'd stand there in the doorway, feeling smaller every time, wondering where my family went. I tried talking to Clarissa once, late at night when Marley was asleep. "We can get through this," I said, reaching for her hand across the couch. She pulled away, her eyes cold. "You lost everything, Tom. What's there to get through?" That stung worse than anything, worse than losing the firm, because I realized she didn't believe in me anymore. Marley stopped asking for pancakes, stopped calling me daddy. She'd walk past me in the hall, earbuds in, like I was invisible. I kept going, though, scraping by, telling myself it'd get better, that they'd see I was still fighting for them. But deep down, I knew something had broken, something I couldn't fix with hard work or time. They didn't want the man I was now, just the life I'd lost. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like an itch I couldn't scratch, and it had been gnawing at me for months. It started small, Clarissa coming home later than usual, her heels clicking on the floor past midnight. She'd say it was work, that her job at the marketing firm was demanding more hours, and I'd nod, trying to believe her. "Okay, just don't burn yourself out," I'd say, forcing a smile, but she'd barely look at me, muttering something about deadlines before disappearing into the bedroom. I wanted to trust her God. I did, but the signs kept piling up, little things that didn't add up. Her perfume lingered stronger some nights, a sharp floral scent that wasn't the one I'd bought her years ago for Christmas. She'd brush it off if I asked, saying it was a sample from a client, but it stuck with me, that smell, like a stranger had walked through our house. Then there was Marley, my little girl who wasn't so little anymore, 16 now, and acting like I was some kind of burden. She'd always been close to her mom, but lately she'd gotten worse, rolling her eyes every time I opened my mouth, muttering under her breath when I asked how school was. "You wouldn't get it, Dad," she'd say, her voice dripping with that teenage attitude. But it felt personal, sharper than it used to be. I'd catch her on her phone, texting nonstop, her fingers flying over the screen, and if I walked into the room, she'd tilt it away, whispering into it like I was the enemy. It made my stomach twist, wondering what they were saying about me behind my back. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was paranoid, that losing the company had messed with my head. But then I saw it, the message that cracked everything wide open. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Clarissa had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran to the store. I wasn't snooping, I swear, just grabbing a glass of water, but the screen lit up with a ping, and there it was, bold as day, dinner at our place next time. Can't wait to see you again. Signed, Gregory. Her boss. My heart stopped, then started pounding so hard I thought it had bust out of my chest. I stood there, staring at those words, my hand shaking around the glass. Gregory, tall, slick, always in those tailored suits, the guy who'd show up at company parties with a grin that made me feel small even when I was still on top. I'd met him a few times, shaken his hand, watched him charm the room while I stood there with my cheap beer. And now he was in my life, in my house, in my wife's head. I clicked the email thread, stupid, maybe, but I had to know, and it was all there. Months of messages, flirty at first, then outright planning. Lunch tomorrow? Missed you last night. He doesn't suspect a thing. That last one hit me like a punch to the gut. He was me. I was the fool who didn't see it coming. I closed the laptop, my hands sweaty, and sat down hard on a stool, trying to breathe. Clarissa wasn't just cheating, she was building a whole new life without me, and she was dragging Marley into it. I thought back to those whispers, the way Marley smirked when Clarissa brushed me off, how she'd started calling me embarrassing in front of her friends. It wasn't just teenage rebellion, she was learning it, soaking it up from her mom like a sponge. Clarissa wanted out, and she was making sure Marley hated me enough to follow her, to leave me behind without a second thought. I heard the front door open, Clarissa's keys dingling as she walked in, and I stood up, shoving the stool back. She froze when she saw me, her eyes flicking to the laptop, then to my face. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, casual, like nothing was up. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop at her, to demand why him, why now, why us. But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I didn't know anymore. "Nothing," I said, my voice low, steady. "Just thinking." She shrugged and walked past me, that damn perfume trailing behind her, and I knew right then, she wasn't mine anymore. Neither of them were. I couldn't let it sit there, festering inside me like some rotten thing, so I decided to confront her that night. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you until you can't breathe. Marley was upstairs, probably glued to her phone, and Clarissa was in the living room, flipping through a magazine like everything was normal. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a second, her perfect hair, her manicured nails, the way she sat like she owned the world, and I felt this mix of anger and sadness boiling up. I'd seen the emails, I knew about Gregory, and I couldn't pretend anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She didn't even look up at first, just turned a page and sighed like I was interrupting her. "What now, Tom?" she said, finally glancing at me, her eyes cold and impatient. I took a step closer, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to keep calm. "I know about Gregory," I said, straight out, no dancing around it. "I saw the messages. You're not even trying to hide it anymore, are you?" For a second, she froze, her fingers hovering over the magazine, and I thought maybe she'd deny it, maybe she'd cry or apologize. But then she laughed, sharp and mean, like I'd told her a bad joke. "Oh, you finally figured it out," she said, tossing the magazine onto the coffee table and leaning back on the couch. "Took you long enough." I stood there, stunned, my mouth dry, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "You're just done with me? With us?" She smirked, crossing her arms, and it was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You think I want to spend my life with a has-been?" she said, every word slicing into me. "Greg takes care of me. He respects me. He's got a future, something you haven't had in years." I wanted to yell, to tell her I'd been trying, that I'd never stopped fighting for us. But then Marley's footsteps thudded down the stairs, and she stopped at the bottom, staring at us. Her hair was tied back, her face blank, and she didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. I looked at her, my little girl, hoping she'd say something, anything, to show she still cared. But she didn't. She just crossed her arms like her mom, silent, picking her side without even opening her mouth. Clarissa kept going, like Marley being there made her bolder. "This is his house now," she said, nodding toward the walls I'd painted, the furniture I'd hauled in when we moved here. "Greg's moving in soon. If you want to stay, you better start contributing something useful. Rent, maybe, since you can't do much else." My head spun, and I felt sick, like the floor was dropping out from under me. His house. This was my home. Our home. The place I'd sweated to keep even after the company tanked. And now she was handing it over to some slick bastard who'd probably never lifted a finger for her the way I had. I looked at Marley again, searching her face for a crack, a hint of the kid who used to hug me goodnight, but she just stared back, her eyes hard, like I was nothing to her. "You agree with this?" I asked her, my voice breaking a little. She shrugged, barely moving her shoulders, and muttered, "Whatever Mom says." That was it, the knife twisting deeper. They teamed up, decided I was disposable, a dead weight they could cut loose. I could have fought, could have screamed that I'd built this life for them, that I loved them through every failure, every late bill, every cold night. But standing there, with Clarissa smirking and Marley looking through me, I saw the truth. They didn't care. They hadn't for a long time. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench, and something shifted inside me. Anger turned cold, sharp, like a tool I could use. "Fine," I said, my voice steady now, low and quiet. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to beg or break, but I didn't. I just nodded, slow and deliberate. "You want me gone? I'm gone. But you're gonna regret this." She laughed again, waving me off like I was a kid making empty threats. But I wasn't. I turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood, and I didn't look back. Upstairs, I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with some clothes, my toothbrush, a few things I couldn't leave behind. The whole time, I kept thinking, not about losing them, but about what I'd do next. They thought I was finished, a washed-up nobody with nothing left. They were wrong. I'd been down before, and I'd climbed back up. This time, I'd do it smarter, quieter, and when they realized what they'd thrown away, I'd be the one laughing. I sat on the edge of the lumpy guest bed at Uncle Reuben's place, the little box from the anniversary dinner resting in my hands, and I let my mind drift back to something Clarissa never knew about, something nobody did. Before the company went under, back when I still had a bit of cash and a lot of hope, I'd made a move that seemed crazy at the time. My old college buddy Sanjay had come to me one night, all jittery and excited, practically begging me to invest in his tech startup. "It's a game changer, Tom," he'd said, his eyes wide over beers at some dive bar. "AI software for small businesses. Nobody's doing it like this. I just need seed money to get it off the ground." I'd been doing well then, my firm pulling in steady contracts, so I wrote him a check for $80,000, most of my personal savings, without telling Clarissa. She'd have freaked out, called it a gamble, and maybe she'd have been right. After that, I forgot about it. The company crashed, life got messy, and Sanjay's little project slipped out of my head. I figured it had fizzled out like most startups do, and I wasn't about to dig through old bank statements to check. But 2 years ago, I got a call from him out of the blue. "Tom, you still alive?" He'd laughed, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Man, you're not gonna believe this. We're going public. That $80,000 you gave me? It's worth something now." I'd been in the middle of fixing a neighbor's lawnmower for $20, grease up to my elbows, and I almost dropped the phone. Turns out, his company had taken off quietly at first, then like a rocket. They built some AI tool that every small business in the country wanted, and when they IPO'd, my shares shot up. I didn't tell anyone, not even Uncle Reuben. I just kept reinvesting, letting it grow, watching the numbers climb in silence while Clarissa and Marley treated me like a loser. Last month, I'd finally cashed out a chunk of it, enough to make me a multimillionaire, more money than I'd ever dreamed of back when I was scrambling to pay the rent. I'd moved it into a new account, separate from the joint one Clarissa still dipped into, and I started planning. That box I'd handed her at the dinner? It wasn't some cheap trinket. Inside was a folder, documentation for a new company I'd set up with Sanjay's help, a luxury vacation deed for a beach house I'd bought outright, and a black credit card with no limit, tied to my new fortune. I'd wanted to show her, to say, "Look, I'm back, better than ever. We can start over." But she didn't even open it, just shoved it away like it was garbage, and Marley backed her up, kicking me out of my own life. Now, sitting in Reuben's spare room, the box felt heavier than it should have. I flipped it open, staring at the papers inside, the sleek black card glinting under the dim lamp. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the weight of what it meant, not just money, but power, a second chance I'd built from nothing. I thought about Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, the way they looked at me like I was less than dirt. They had no idea what I'd been hiding, what I'd turned into while they were busy writing me off. I could have gone back that night, waved the card in their faces, told them I was worth more than Gregory and his fancy suits ever would be. But I didn't. I closed the box, set it on the nightstand, and leaned back against the headboard, the springs creaking under me. Revenge wasn't about flashing cash or rubbing it in. It was about letting them figure it out on their own, watching them scorn when the truth hit. I'd been a ghost in their world for years, invisible, useless in their eyes. Now, I was something else, a man with a plan, a man they'd underestimated. I pictured Clarissa's face when the bills started bouncing, when Gregory's promises fell apart, when Marley realized her perfect little life wasn't so perfect anymore. I didn't need to yell or fight. I just needed to wait. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street, the moon hanging low over the trees. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My chest didn't feel tight. For the first time in years, I felt steady, like I was standing on solid ground again. They'd throw me out, sure, but they'd also set me free. And that box? It wasn't just a gift. It was proof I wasn't the man they thought I was. Not anymore. I stood in the kitchen that night, the anniversary dinner spread out on the table, roast chicken cooling, potatoes getting stiff, candles dripping wax onto the cloth I'd ironed just for this. I'd wanted it to be perfect, a chance to show Clarissa we could still fix things, that I wasn't the failure she saw me as. My hands were sweaty as I slid the little box across to her, the one with the papers, the deed, the card, everything I'd been hiding. Happy anniversary, I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be, hoping she'd hear the weight behind it. She barely glanced at it, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. What's this supposed to be? She said, pushing it back toward me without even touching the ribbon. Before I could answer, Marley chimed in, her voice sharp and bored. It's probably junk. Just leave, Dad. I looked at them, my wife, my daughter, and felt the air shift, like the room was closing in. I'd planned to tell them everything, to open the box and lay it all out. The money, the company, the life I could give them now. But they didn't give me a chance. Clarissa stood up, brushing her hands like she was done with me for good. Get out, she said, flat and cold, and Marley smirked, crossing her arms like she'd been waiting for this. I opened my mouth to argue, to say something, anything, but then the front door creaked open, and there he was. Gregory. Tall, polished, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder like he owned the place. He strolled in, grinning, and dropped his keys on the counter, my counter, like it was his house already. Evening, folks, he said, his voice smooth, and he slid an arm around Clarissa's waist right in front of me. She leaned into him, laughing a little, and he grabbed my wine glass, the one I'd poured for myself, and filled it from the bottle I'd bought. Cheers, he said, raising it to me with a wink before taking a sip. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him drink from my glass, his hand on my wife, my daughter smirking like it was some big win. The room spun for a second, and I felt this hot, jagged thing rise up in my chest, anger, hurt, humiliation, all mixed together. I could have lunged at him, smashed the glass out of his hand, demanded they all listen. But I didn't. Something clicked instead, something cold and clear. I looked at Clarissa, her eyes locked on Gregory like I wasn't even there, and Marley, tapping away on her phone, probably texting her friends about how pathetic I was. They didn't deserve the truth, not yet. I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and forced a smile, small and tight. All right, I said, my voice steady, almost light. I'll go. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, like she expected me to beg, but I just turned and headed for the door. Gregory called after me, take care, Tom, his tone dripping with fake pity, and I heard Clarissa laugh again as I stepped outside. The night air hit me hard, crisp and sharp, and I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. I slid into the driver's seat, the box on my lap, and sat there for a minute, staring at the house, our house, my house, lights glowing through the windows. I could still hear them inside, their voices faint, probably joking about how I'd slunk off like a kicked dog. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and I thought about going back in, unloading everything, telling them I was a millionaire now, that I'd outdone Gregory 10 times over. But I didn't. I started the engine, the rumble filling the silence, and pulled out of the driveway. As I drove away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror, that smile stayed on my face, not big, not loud, just there. They'd remember it later, that quiet little grin, when they realized what they'd lost. I wasn't running. I wasn't broken. I was done playing their game. The road stretched out ahead, dark and empty, and I felt lighter than I had in years. They thought they'd won, kicking me out, replacing me with that smug bastard. But they didn't know what I had in that box, what I'd been building while they laughed. I turned up the radio, some old rock song buzzing through the speakers, and let the miles roll by. Uncle Reuben's place wasn't far, and I'd crash there tonight, figure out the rest tomorrow. For now, I just drove, the weight of the box a reminder, not of failure, but of power. They'd changed everything that night, sure, but not the way they thought. They'd set me loose, and I was ready to rise. I woke up the next morning on Uncle Reuben's old couch, the springs digging into my back, the smell of strong coffee pulling me out of a restless sleep. My duffel bag sat in the corner, the little box perched on top like a silent promise, and I could still hear Clarissa's voice from last night, "Get out," echoing in my head. Reuben shuffled in, his gray hair sticking up, a mug in each hand. "Told you she was poison," he said, gruff as always, handing me the coffee. I took it, the heat seeping into my palms, and nodded. "Yeah, you did," I said, my voice scratchy from the night. He didn't push, just sat across from me in his beat-up recliner, sipping his drink, letting me think. I'd crashed here after driving away from the house. The image of Gregory pouring wine into my glass burned into my brain. But sitting there, with the morning light creeping through the blinds, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake, really awake, for the first time in years. Ruben's place was small, cluttered with old tools and fishing gear, but it was solid, a lifeline I could grab onto. "What's the plan, kid?" he asked, eyeing me over his mug. I leaned back, the coffee bitter on my tongue, and let the pieces fall into place. I wasn't going back to that house, not to beg or fight. I was done with that life. "I'm building something," I said, slow and sure. "Something new." He grunted, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. "About damn time." That day, I got to work. I drove downtown in my rattling sedan, the box-riding shotgun, and met with a realtor I'd found online. She was a no-nonsense woman named Linda, all sharp edges and quick questions, and within hours, I'd leased a penthouse, top floor, big windows, a view of the city that made my old life look small. I didn't blink at the price. The black card in that box could handle it. I stood in the empty space later that afternoon, the hardwood floors gleaming, the skyline stretching out below, and felt my shoulders loosen. This was mine, nobody else's. Next, I called Sanjay. "Need an assistant," I told him. "Someone good, full-time." He laughed, that same excited laugh from the bar all those years ago. "You're really doing this, huh? I'll send you someone tomorrow." By the next day, I had Tara, young, sharp, with a clipboard and a knack for keeping things moving. She didn't ask about my past, just nodded when I said I was starting a venture capital firm. "What's the name?" she asked, pen poised. I thought about it, staring out at the city. "Silverline Ventures," I said. A new line, a new start. We set up shop fast, laptops, a desk, a phone line, and I pulled more cash from my account, the one Clarissa didn't know about. I'd been funneling money there for months, ever since I sold those shares, and now it was time to use it. I started scouting startups, small outfits like Sanjay's had been, places with big ideas and no capital. I'd been on the other side once, begging for a chance, and now I could give it. Silverline Ventures wasn't just a name, it was me, back in the game, stronger than before. Clarissa and Marley didn't cross my mind much those first few days. I was too busy, too focused. Tara handled calls, I met with founders, and Ruben dropped by with takeout, grumbling about the traffic but grinning when he saw the penthouse. "Not bad, kid," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I was building in silence, brick by brick, and it felt good, damn good, to be the one in control again. Then the letters started showing up. The first one came a week after the dinner, forwarded from the old address to Ruben's. Clarissa's handwriting, neat and slanted, on a plain envelope. I didn't open it, just tossed it on the kitchen table and kept moving. Another came 2 days later, then a third, each one thicker, like she was pouring more words into them. I didn't read those either. Marley sent one too, her messy scrawl a shock after all her silence, but I left it unopened with the rest. My phone buzzed sometimes, her number, then Marley's, but I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear their voices yet. I knew what was coming. They'd figure it out soon. The money, the life I'd hidden, and they'd want back in. But I wasn't ready to let them. I stood on the penthouse balcony one night, the city lights twinkling below, a glass of whiskey in my hand. The air was cool, the world quiet except for the hum of traffic far off. I thought about that dinner, Gregory's smug face, Clarissa's laugh, Marley's smirk. They'd kicked me out, sure, but they'd also handed me this, a clean slate, a chance to rise without their weight dragging me down. I was back, stronger, richer, sharper. And when they came knocking, I'd be the one deciding who got in. I was sitting at my new desk in the penthouse, papers spread out, Tara typing away across the room. When I got the first hint it was starting to unravel for them. My phone buzzed, not Clarissa or Marley this time, but the bank. I'd pulled my name off the joint account the night before the anniversary dinner, a quiet move I'd made after seeing Gregory waltz in like he owned the place. The banker's voice was calm, professional. "Just confirming the mortgage payment bounced, sir. The account's overdrawn." I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin creeping across my face. "Not my problem anymore," I said. "I'm not on it." He paused, then said, "Understood," and hung up. I pictured Clarissa standing in the kitchen, staring at a declined card, her perfect little world cracking. She'd always handled the bills, dipping into that account like it was bottomless, never asking where the money came from. Well, it was my money keeping it afloat, and now it was gone. A few days later, I got a call from a guy I knew at the car dealership. "Hey Tom, just a heads up, your wife's lease on that SUV? It's in your name, and she missed the payment. We're repossessing it tomorrow." I chuckled, sipping my coffee. "Go ahead," I said. "I'm not paying it." The car was hers in every way but the paperwork. Shiny, black, the kind of thing she loved showing off. I could see her now, fuming as they towed it away, Marley whining about how she'd get to school. It wasn't spite, not really. It was just me stepping back, letting them feel the weight of their choices. The call started soon after. Clarissa first, her voice loud through the voicemail. "You better help us, Tom. This is your mess too." I didn't pick up, just let it play while I ate lunch. Ruben's leftover meatloaf, still better than anything she'd cooked lately. Then Marley, her tone sharp but shaky. "Dad, what's going on? Mom's freaking out. Call me back." I didn't. The house, the car, the bills, they'd built their life on me, and now the foundation was gone. I kept working, meeting with startups, signing checks with that black card, while their world fell apart. Word got around fast. A buddy from the old neighborhood texted me. "Saw Gregory peel out of your driveway last night. Looked pissed." I wasn't surprised. Sanjay had done some digging for me. Turns out Gregory's successful life was a house of cards. Bad investments, a failing side hustle, debts he couldn't pay. He'd been leaning on Clarissa's stability, her house, her money, my money, to prop himself up. When the mortgage bounced and the car vanished, he bolted. I laughed out loud when I heard, imagining her face when he walked out, leaving her with nothing but her pride. Marley started posting online, vague, dramatic stuff like everything's falling apart and people suck. I saw it on my phone one night, scrolling while Tara ordered takeout. The kid who'd smirked at me was crumbling, and part of me felt a pang. She was still my daughter, but it faded fast. She'd chosen her side. The calls changed after that. Clarissa's voice softened, desperate now. "Please, Tom, just talk to me. We can figure this out." Then Marley, quieter, almost scared. "Dad, I'm sorry. Can you call me?" I let them stack up, a dozen voicemails I didn't answer. They'd kicked me out, laughed me off, and now they were drowning. One night, I was on the balcony, the city humming below, a beer in my hand, when the phone rang again. Clarissa. I stared at it, the screen glowing in the dark, and something made me pick up. Her voice came through, small and shaky. "Tom? Oh God, please don't hang up. I miss you. Can we meet?" I let the silence stretch, listening to her breathe, picturing her in that house, empty now, no car, no Gregory, no money. "You threw away a diamond for costume jewelry," I said, my voice low, steady. She didn't say anything, just sniffled, and I hung up. That was it. No yelling, no begging, just the truth. I set the phone down, took a long sip of beer, and looked out at the lights. The fall had begun, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. They'd made their bed, let them lie in it. I'd warned them at the dinner, that quiet, "You'll regret this," and now they did. The penthouse was warm behind me, Tara's laugh drifting out as she talked to someone on the phone, and I felt solid, rooted. They'd lost everything: Gregory, the house, the life, and I'd lost nothing that mattered. I was free, and they were stuck, scrambling for scraps I wouldn't give. The phone stayed quiet after that, and I knew they'd gotten the message. I wasn't their lifeline anymore. I was pushing a cart through the supermarket, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when I saw her. Marley, standing by the discount bins, a bag of ramen noodles in her hand. It had been weeks since the last call, since I'd told Clarissa they'd thrown away a diamond, and I hadn't expected to run into either of them. She looked different, hair messy, pulled back in a sloppy ponytail, her hoodie sagging off one shoulder, no trace of the polished teenager who'd smirked at me that night. Her cart had a few cheap items: soap, a loaf of bread, some canned stuff. And I stopped, the wheels squeaking on the tile. She glanced up, and her eyes went wide, like she'd seen a ghost. "Dad?" she whispered, the ramen slipping a little in her grip. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at her. Part of me wanted to walk away, to keep moving past the aisle like she wasn't there, but something held me back. "Hey," I said, my voice flat, not giving much away. She shifted, clutching the bag tighter, and took a step closer. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small, almost lost in the hum of the store. I nodded, slow and careful, and pushed my cart to the side, leaning against it. "Go ahead," I said. She swallowed, looking down at her sneakers, worn out, scuffed, and started talking. Things are bad, Dad. Really bad. Mom's a mess. The house is gone. We're in some crappy apartment now. Gregory left. And she cries all the time. I listened, my arms crossed, keeping my face steady. I could picture Clarissa unraveling without her perfect life, but I didn't feel the pull to fix it. Not anymore. Marley kept going, her words tumbling out. I didn't know it'd get like this. I thought Mom was right, that you were just, I don't know, holding us back. But now everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do. She looked up at me then, her eyes wet, pleading. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean it. All that stuff I said. I took a deep breath, the air cold from the freezers nearby, and let her words settle. I'd waited for this, hadn't I? For them to see what they'd done, to come crawling back? But hearing it didn't feel like a win. It just felt heavy. You were a kid, I said, my voice low but firm. You followed her lead. I get that. But you stood there, Marley, while she kicked me out. You laughed with her. That's not something I can just forget. Her face crumpled a little, and she nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve. I know, she said. I messed up. I miss you. I didn't realize how much until now. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the girl she used to be, my little shadow, the one who'd climb into my lap and beg for stories. But that was gone, buried under years of her choosing Clarissa's side. Trust's a hard thing, I said. Once it's broken, it doesn't snap back together overnight. You hurt me, Marley, both of you did. I'm not saying never, but I'm not ready to pretend it didn't happen. She nodded again, tears spilling now, and I felt that old ache in my chest, the one that came from loving her even when she turned away. Okay, she whispered. I just wanted you to know. I didn't hug her, didn't promise anything, I couldn't yet. I just gave her a small nod and said, take care of yourself, before pushing my cart past her. The rest of the shopping felt mechanical, my hands grabbing cereal and milk while my mind churned. That night, an email popped up from Clarissa. Tom, I was angry. I was stupid. Please, let's have coffee. I stared at it, the cursor blinking, and typed back. The man you insulted is gone. The man you need now doesn't exist for you. I hit send and closed the laptop. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. I sat on the penthouse couch, the city lights glowing through the windows, and thought about Marley's face, lost, scared, sorry. I'd meant what I said. Trust was a slow build, and they'd torched it. But she was my kid, and that tugged at me, even if I didn't want it to. I didn't owe them anything, not after what they'd done, but I wasn't sure I could cut them off forever either. Not yet. I got up, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window, watching the world move below. They were falling, and I was rising, and maybe someday there'd be a middle ground. But for now, I let them sit with it, their choices, their regrets, while I kept building, step by step, on my own terms. I stood in the penthouse kitchen a year later, the smell of grilled steak and garlic bread wafting through the air, the clink of glasses and laughter filling the space. It was a quiet dinner party, nothing flashy, just the people who'd stuck by me, the ones who mattered. Uncle Reuben was there, leaning back in a chair with a beer, his gravelly voice cutting through the chatter as he told some old fishing story. Sanjay sat across from him, grinning, his tie loosened after a long day, toasting me with a glass of red wine. To the man who bet on me when nobody else did, he said, and I raised my glass back, feeling the warmth of it settle in my chest. Tara was there too, my assistant-turned-friend, joking with the small team I'd built at Silverline Ventures, good people, sharp and loyal, who'd helped turn my little firm into something real. And then there was Nora, sitting next to me, her dark hair catching the light, her laugh soft but bright. I'd met her a few months back at a business conference, smart, steady, with a way of seeing through bullshit that reminded me of Reuben. She wasn't pushy, didn't need anything from me, just showed up with her dry humor and kind eyes, and somehow, she'd become part of this new life. We'd been taking it slow. No labels, just dinners and late-night talks, but having her here tonight felt right. The table was crowded with plates, steak, potatoes, a big salad Reuben insisted on making, and the city lights twinkled outside, framing us like a picture I never thought I'd have. I looked around, soaking it in, and realized Clarissa and Marley hadn't crossed my mind all night. They were ghosts now, shadows from a life I'd left behind. After that supermarket run-in with Marley, after Clarissa's unanswered email, they'd faded out. No more calls, no more letters, just silence. I'd heard through the grapevine they'd moved somewhere cheaper, that Clarissa was working some low-end job that Marley was scraping by at community college. I didn't check, didn't dig. They weren't my story anymore. We finished eating, and I stepped onto the balcony, the cool air brushing my face, a glass of whiskey in my hand. Nora followed me out, leaning on the railing beside me, her shoulder close but not touching. "Nice night," she said, her voice easy, and I nodded, staring at the skyline. "Yeah, feels good." She didn't ask about the past, she never did, but I could tell she knew there was weight behind my quiet. Inside, Ruben's laugh boomed, Sanjay's voice rising over it, and I smiled to myself. This was my family now, the real one, not blood, not obligation, but choice. I set the glass down and pulled the little box from my pocket, the same one from that anniversary dinner, the one Clarissa had shoved away. I'd kept it, not for them, but for me. I flipped it open, the papers still inside, the black card glinting, and I took out a pen from my jacket. On a scrap of paper, I wrote, "To the man I used to be. Thank you for surviving." I folded it, slipped it into the box, and closed the lid, feeling lighter than I had in years. Nora glanced over, curious but not prying. "What's that?" she asked, her tone light. "Just a note," I said, sliding the box back into my pocket. "Saying goodbye to some old stuff." She nodded, like she got it, and we stood there, the city humming below, the stars faint above. I thought about that night a year ago, Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, Gregory's smug grin, and how it had pushed me here. They'd meant to break me, to toss me out like trash, but instead, they'd handed me a way out. I'd risen quietly, built this life step by step, and now I was standing taller than ever. The dinner party wound down, Ruben clapping me on the back as he left, Sanjay promising to call about a new deal, Tara hugging me quick before heading out. Nora stayed, helping me stack plates, her presence steady and calm. "Good crew," she said, drying a glass, and I nodded. "The best." Later, alone on the balcony again, I looked at the box one last time, then set it on the ledge. It wasn't about them anymore, Clarissa, Marley, the betrayal. It was about me, the man I'd become, the one who'd survived and thrived. I toasted the air, the city, the future, and let the past slip away for good. I wasn't supposed to be home today. In fact, I wasn't supposed to be home for another week. That's why I didn't tell Sophia I was coming back early. I wanted to surprise her, something different from the usual phone calls and video chats we had while I was away. I pictured her reaction, the way her face would light up when she saw me standing at the door. She'd throw her arms around me, maybe even cry a little, telling me how much she missed me. That was the plan. Reality, however, had a way of twisting things in ways you never see coming. The drive home was uneventful. The airport had been a breeze for once. No delays, no lost luggage, no traffic jams. It felt like everything was aligning for my perfect surprise. My suitcase sat on the passenger seat, my phone buzzing occasionally with unread messages. I didn't check them. I wanted to be fully present when I stepped through that door. I imagined how it would feel to sleep in my own bed again, to kiss my wife after weeks of being apart. But as I turned onto our street, something felt off. Cars lined the curb in front of my house, more than usual. At first, I thought maybe Sophia had friends over. That wouldn't have been strange, except for the fact that these weren't familiar cars. Some were sleek, expensive, the kind that stood out in our modest neighborhood. Others had baby-themed decorations tied to their side mirrors, tiny blue and pink ribbons fluttering in the breeze. Then I saw it. The front yard was decorated with balloons, pink and blue, tied to the railing, swaying gently with the wind. A huge banner stretched across the porch, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Welcome, our little miracle." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My first thought wasn't even suspicion. No, my brain was still trying to make sense of it. Our little miracle? Whose little miracle? The house I had left behind looked different. Not physically. The walls were still the same. The garden still trimmed the way I liked it. But the atmosphere had changed. It felt like I was walking into someone else's life. I could hear laughter spilling from inside. Music. The clinking of glasses. A party. For a baby. I pulled over a few houses down, just far enough that no one would see me yet. My hands felt clammy against the leather of the steering wheel, my heartbeat quickening for reasons I couldn't explain. There was no logical reason for this to unsettle me. Maybe it was just a neighbor's event, and the banner was visible from our house. Maybe Sophia had planned a surprise for someone else. Maybe. I turned off the engine and stepped out. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and something sweet. Cake, probably. A celebration. For a second, I considered calling Sophia. But then, I dismissed the idea. I wanted to see it for myself. To understand before I let my mind spiral into places it didn't need to go. I walked toward the house slowly, feeling like an intruder in my own life. The closer I got, the more details I noticed. Through the large living room window, I saw people everywhere. Some familiar faces, some I didn't recognize. They were smiling, drinking, celebrating. But the most striking thing was the way everything looked prepared. The decorations weren't last minute. The gifts stacked near the fireplace weren't a casual gesture. This wasn't something that had just come together overnight. This was planned. My stomach twisted. Still, I hesitated. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe. Then I noticed something else. The front door. It wasn't shut properly. It was slightly ajar, as if welcoming me inside, or daring me to step in. I took a deep breath and crossed the threshold. The moment I stepped in, the noise hit me full force. Laughter, conversations, the soft melody of background music. No one had noticed me yet, and for a brief moment, I wished it could stay that way, because I could already feel it. Something was wrong. Then I saw her. Sophia. She stood in the center of the living room, radiant, glowing. But it wasn't me she was smiling at. It was him. Jonah. My best friend. And his hands, were gently placed on her swollen belly. The belly I didn't know existed. Everything inside me froze. The conversations in the room faded into background noise. My mother, standing near the kitchen, stiffened when she saw me. She knew. That realization hit me harder than anything else. They all knew. Jonah was saying something about the nursery. Something about how he had been painting it himself, how he and Sophia had picked out the crib together. I felt like I was drowning. My mind struggled to keep up, to process. There was no explanation that made sense. No version of this reality where I was not the fool. Sophia turned her head slightly, mid-laugh, mid-conversation, mid-whatever this was, and then her gaze met mine. She froze. I saw the exact moment her world came crashing down. The moment she realized the lie had collapsed. Jonah, unaware, kept talking, his hand still resting protectively on her stomach. We picked it out together last week. He was smiling, like he hadn't just driven a knife straight through my chest, like he hadn't just ruined my entire life. I didn't even feel my mother grab my arm. I barely registered the way she tried to steer me toward the door. We weren't expecting you today, she whispered urgently. As if that changed anything. As if me arriving today instead of next week somehow altered the fact that my best friend was standing in my house with his hands on my wife. I yanked my arm away, my voice dangerously low. Talk about what? I asked, my words slow and deliberate. Talk about how my wife is pregnant with my best friend's child? The room fell silent. Someone turned off the music. Even the air felt still, as if it was waiting. Sophia's face had gone pale. Jonah's hands finally dropped from her belly, but it was too late. I had already seen it all. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a surprise meant for me. This was betrayal. A perfectly orchestrated, long-kept betrayal. And now, everyone was just waiting to see what I would do next. Silence. That was the first thing that filled the room after my words sliced through the celebration like a knife. The laughter stopped. The clinking of glasses halted. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes were on me. My mother-in-law, Marissa, who had been rubbing Sophia's stomach just moments before, pulled her hand away as if it had been burned. My father, Gregory, who had been drinking quietly in the corner, wouldn't meet my eyes. And Sophia, my wife, my partner, the woman I had built a life with, stood frozen in place. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Jonah's hands finally dropped from her belly. I saw him stiffen, his body language shifting from relaxed to rigid, like a man who had just been caught red-handed. Because he had been. Sophia was the first to react. "Noah, please," she whispered. I can explain." Explain? She wanted to explain? Like there was an explanation in this world that could make this okay? I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. My hands were fists at my sides, my breathing heavy, measured, controlled, barely. "Go on," I said, my voice disturbingly calm. "I'd love to hear it." No one spoke. The weight of my words hung in the air, pressing down on every person in that room. Jonah, who had always been quick with his words, always had a smooth answer for everything, stood there like a guilty coward. The man who had once been my closest friend now looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. And my mother? Oh, my mother. She was still trying to do damage control, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. Noah, let's step outside, she urged, her voice soft, her grip on my arm tightening. This isn't the time. I ripped my arm from her grasp. This isn't the time? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. When would have been the right time, Mom? When the baby was born. When my best friend's kid started calling me Uncle Noah? My father shifted uncomfortably, still not looking at me. He had known, and he had said nothing. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You knew, didn't you? I asked him. His silence was my answer. The rage inside me burned hotter. I turned back to Sophia. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but I didn't care. She didn't get to cry. Not when I had spent months working overseas, busting my ass, thinking I was building a future for us, while she was doing this. Tell me, Sophia, I said slowly, enunciating each word. How long? She swallowed hard. Noah, please, it's not what you think. Not what I think. The words made something inside me snap. So you're telling me my eyes are lying to me? I asked, gesturing to the very obvious bump in her stomach. You're telling me that's not his child? That this whole baby shower, the decorations, the gifts, the nursery, everything, isn't exactly what it looks like. Her lip trembled. I didn't want you to find out this way, she whispered. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Oh, how considerate of you, I said. How exactly were you planning on telling me, Sophia? After the baby was born? Or were you just going to let me keep believing we were still married while you played house with him? I turned to Jonah, who still hadn't said a damn word. What's the matter, Jonah? I asked, my tone dripping with venom. Cat got your tongue? You had a lot to say when you were screwing my wife. He flinched. Good. I wanted him to feel that sting. I wanted him to feel even an ounce of what I was feeling. Noah, it wasn't like that. Jonah finally spoke, his voice tight, defensive. We didn't mean for this to happen. That phrase. We didn't mean for this to happen. I almost lunged at him right there. Instead, I laughed again. A sharp, cutting laugh. Didn't mean for it to happen? I echoed, shaking my head. So what? You just tripped and fell inside her. A collective gasp sounded around the room. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Some picked up their bags, clearly wanting to leave, but too afraid to move. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. Sophia wiped at her face, tears streaming freely now. Noah, I never wanted to hurt you, she cried. I scoffed. Yeah? Could have fooled me. Marissa, my mother-in-law, finally stepped in. And of course, she wasn't stepping in for me. Noah, enough, she snapped. Sophia doesn't need this stress. Stress. She was worried about Sophia's stress. A sickening wave of nausea rolled over me, the sheer irony of it making my head spin. Her stress. I repeated slowly, turning to face her. Where was this concern when I lost my baby 2 years ago? Marissa's face drained of color. Sophia sucked in a sharp breath. Jonah looked away. They all knew exactly what I was talking about. 2 years ago, I had sat in a hospital waiting room, gripping Sophia's hand while she cried, my heart breaking as we lost our child before we even had the chance to meet them. I had held her through the nights of grief, whispered reassurances that we'd get through it together, that when we were ready, we'd try again. And now? Now she was carrying another man's child, while everyone around me celebrated like it was some miracle. I felt my chest tighten. I had to get out of there. I turned to the gift table, scanning the neatly wrapped boxes until I saw one with my mother's name on it. I grabbed it, ignoring her protests, and tore it open. A small, white onesie with blue details fell into my hands. She had bought a gift for my wife's affair baby. My own mother. I felt sick. I turned to her, my voice low. You got her something nice, Mom, I said. Did you keep the receipt? Sophia let out a choked sob. My mother's lip trembled. Jonah stepped forward again. Noah, please. I dropped the onesie at his feet. Enough, I said, my voice suddenly cold, emotionless. I looked around the room at all the faces, people I had once trusted, people who had sat in my home, laughed with me, eaten meals with me, all while knowing. I inhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay composed. Then, I turned to Jonah. You better get a job, I told him, my voice calm. Because from this moment on, you're on your own. Jonah's face paled. What do you mean? I smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. It means, Jonah, that while I was overseas, I wasn't just working, I said. I was also consulting a lawyer. Sophia stiffened. Jonah's eyes widened. I let the moment hang before I said the words that sealed his fate. I have proof of every penny I spent on this house, I said. On this marriage. On you. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door. Let them all sit in their mess. I was done. The night air hit me like a cold slap as I stepped outside. The weight of the discovery was suffocating, pressing down on my chest like a vice. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was from rage or shock. Behind me, the celebration had turned into a stunned silence, but I knew it wouldn't last. The whispers would start soon. The justifications. The excuses. But I didn't care. I couldn't care. Not after what I had just seen. I had spent the last year breaking my back overseas, working endless hours, sending every paycheck home. All for this? For my wife to betray me with the one person I trusted most? A bitter laugh escaped my lips. I should have seen the signs. Maybe I did, deep down. Maybe that's why I never told Sophia I was coming home early. Because somewhere inside me, I had suspected. But nothing could have prepared me for this. Before I could take another step toward my car, the front door swung open behind me. Noah, wait. Sophia's voice. I kept walking. She hurried down the steps, the soft thud of her flats against the pavement barely audible over the sound of my blood pounding in my ears. Please, she begged. Just talk to me. Talk. I stopped abruptly and turned around, barely restraining the storm inside me. Talk to you. I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. Like how you talked to me while you were screwing Jonah. That kind of talk. She winced, wrapping her arms around her stomach as if shielding herself from my words. Good. Let her feel just a fraction of the pain I was feeling. Noah, it wasn't like that, she whispered. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Oh, so what was it like, Sophia? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn clear. Tears welled up in her eyes. I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered everything. The late-night calls where she told me she missed me. The video chats where she smiled, saying she couldn't wait for me to come home. The messages where she told me she loved me. All lies. You were gone for so long, she whispered, voice trembling. You don't understand what it was like being alone all the time. My jaw tightened. So that justifies it. I asked. That justifies betraying me with Jonah? She shook her head quickly. No. I didn't plan for it to happen. I felt my fingers curl into fists. That's the same bullshit Jonah said. She flinched. Good. Tell me something, Sophia, I continued, stepping closer. When exactly did it just happen? When I was sending money for our future. When I was working night shifts so I could come home and give you the life you deserved. When I called, and you told me you loved me. When? I stopped myself, shaking my head. Forget it. None of it matters now. Sophia's face crumpled. It does matter. No, Sophia, I said, voice clipped. It doesn't. Because you already made your choice. Her lip trembled. Noah, please. I still love you. I scoffed. Love? I echoed, my voice dripping with disbelief. Is that what you call this? I gestured toward the house, the decorations, the celebration she had planned behind my back. Because from where I'm standing, this doesn't look like love. It looks like a goddamn joke. I could see her panic rising now. I never wanted to hurt you, she insisted. I exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of my nose. Stop saying that. But it's true. No, Sophia. I cut her off, my patience snapping. If you didn't want to hurt me, you wouldn't have done this. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman I had married. The woman I had trusted. But she wasn't that woman anymore. I can't lose you, she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment. You already did. And with that, I turned my back on her. I had barely taken 2 steps when another voice called after me. Noah. Jonah. I went rigid. My fists clenched at my sides. I turned slowly, my entire body coiled with tension. Jonah stood in the doorway, looking guilty as hell. His usual confidence, the cocky smirk he always wore, was gone. I wanted to hit him. Badly. I wanted to wipe that pathetic expression off his face, make him feel even a fraction of the rage that was boiling inside me. But I didn't. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I took a slow, measured breath. You have 10 seconds, I said, voice eerily calm. Say what you need to say. Jonah swallowed hard. I I never wanted you to find out this way. That was his opening line. A dark chuckle escaped me. Oh, that's rich, I said. Not I'm sorry, not I shouldn't have done it, not I betrayed you in the worst possible way. Just that you never wanted me to find out this way. Jonah had the decency to look ashamed. No, man. Don't man me, I snapped, stepping forward until I was right in his face. You don't get to call me that. You don't get to act like we're still friends. You lost that right the moment you put your hands on my wife. Jonah looked down, swallowing thickly. I shook my head. Tell me, Jonah, when did it start? He hesitated. Wrong move. I let out another laugh, shaking my head. You don't even have the balls to tell me the truth, do you? It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered. I don't remember unlocking my car door. I don't remember getting in. All I remember is gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles turned white. My breathing was shallow, uneven, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged animal. I was supposed to come home to my wife. I was supposed to surprise her. Instead, I had walked into a celebration for another man's child. I clenched my jaw as my vision blurred for a moment. But I refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not now. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. My hands were still shaking, my entire body stiff with the weight of betrayal, but I didn't care. I needed to get the hell away from this place. From them. From the house I had built. The house I had paid for. The house that had become a stage for the greatest humiliation of my life. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of them through my rearview mirror. Sophia, standing frozen in the driveway. Jonah, looking lost, confused, terrified. My mother, whispering furiously to my father. Marissa, still holding the banner like some kind of twisted joke. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth and floored the gas pedal. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there. I drove aimlessly, my mind replaying every moment of the past few months. The late-night calls. The I miss you messages. The lies. Had she been with him when she texted me those things? Had she laughed with him, whispered to him in the dark, while I sat in some hotel room on the other side of the world, thinking I was making sacrifices for us? A humorless chuckle escaped me. God, I was a fool. I gritted my teeth, gripping the wheel tighter. The anger in my chest burned like acid, searing through every rational thought I had left. I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there, small, almost imperceptible shifts in her behavior. The way she started hesitating before answering my calls. The way she sometimes took a second too long to respond to my messages. The way she no longer sounded lonely when I told her I missed her. And Jonah, my best friend. The man I trusted more than anyone. I had known him for years. He had been the first person I called when I got the job offer overseas. He had been the one telling me how proud he was, how he'd look after Sophia while I was gone. How stupid could I have been? I pressed the gas pedal harder. The city lights blurred past me. I needed somewhere to think, somewhere to breathe. I ended up at a cheap roadside motel, the neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. It wasn't home, but at least it was far away from that house. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I slid my card across the counter. She handed me the key, and I took the stairs 2 at a time, desperate to be alone. The second the door shut behind me, the weight of everything finally crashed down on me. I barely made it to the bed before I collapsed onto it. And that's when I finally broke. I pressed my palms into my face as a sound tore from my throat. Something raw, something ugly. I wasn't crying. Not in the way most people cry. No. This was different. This was years of sacrifice, trust, and love collapsing in on itself. This was grief. Not for a person, but for a life that never really existed. My chest heaved as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my marriage was over. That everything I thought I was building was gone. That I had been reduced to nothing more than an afterthought in my own home. I rolled onto my side, my hand clenching into a fist. No. I wouldn't let them have the satisfaction of breaking me. I wouldn't let them win. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. My body ached from tension, my eyes burned from exhaustion, but my mind was clear. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number. My lawyer. I hit dial. Noah, came the groggy voice on the other end. It's early. What's up? I want to start the process today, I said firmly. There was a pause. The divorce, property division, everything. He let out a low whistle. Damn, that bad. I exhaled sharply, running a hand over my jaw. Worse. A rustling sound. Papers shifting. All right. We'll file first thing Monday. I assume you want this handled aggressively. I smiled grimly. Oh, I want it handled so aggressively that Jonah will wish he never met her. The first text came that afternoon. Sophia, Noah, please talk to me. I know you're hurt, but we need to discuss this. I didn't respond. The next one came an hour later. Jonah, man, I know you're mad. I get it. But can we at least have a conversation? I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked my phone and tossed it onto the bed. I wasn't playing their game. Let them squirm. The following day, I had coffee at a small cafe near the motel. The world outside kept turning, as if my life hadn't just been ripped apart. People laughed, couples held hands, parents fed their kids. Life moved on. And I would too. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the beginnings of something foreign creeping into my chest. Relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't obligated to hold everything together. I wasn't breaking my back trying to make someone else happy. I was free. And that thought, it was the first thing that made me truly smile. That night, I finally sent a response. To Jonah. 2 words. Talk to my lawyer. And with that, I turned off my phone. No more explanations. No more chances. No more Noah, please. I had given them everything. And now, I was taking everything back. 5. The legal battle begins. The weight of everything didn't hit me all at once. It came in waves, some small, barely noticeable, others so overwhelming that I could barely breathe. But amidst all of it, one thing remained clear: I was done. The betrayal had already happened. The damage was already done. Now, it was about taking back control. I spent the next morning sitting in my motel room, staring at my phone, waiting for my lawyer to call. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Noah, we're good to go. I leaned back against the headboard, gripping the phone tighter. Walk me through it. We're filing today. The house is in your name, and all financial contributions are documented under you. Jonah has no legal claim to it. I exhaled slowly. And Sophia? She'll have the right to contest, but given the circumstances, it won't hold up. We're filing for an uncontested divorce, and with the financial records we have, she won't be able to touch a dime of your money. If she fights it, we can take it to court, but honestly, she won't win. I let that sink in. My entire marriage, reduced to legal terms and financial evidence. It was ironic, really. I had built everything for us, for a future, and now, the only thing that mattered was how fast I could dismantle it. What about my accounts? I asked. Already in motion. We're securing your assets and freezing joint ones. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Jonah thought he had won, that he had taken something from me, but he had no idea what was coming. The first signs of panic. The messages started flooding in that afternoon. First, Sophia. Sophia, Noah, I know you're angry, but can we talk? I didn't want this to happen this way. I ignored it. An hour later, another one. Sophia, please, just one conversation. You don't have to do this. Don't have to do this. She was acting as if she hadn't ripped our marriage apart. As if I was the one choosing to end things, rather than reacting to the mess she had created. Then came Jonah. Jonah, man, I messed up. I get it. But let's not go nuclear, all right? We can figure this out. Figure this out? The audacity. He had already figured it out when he decided to betray me. When he stood in my house, at my wife's side, preparing for a child that wasn't mine. I locked my phone. I wasn't playing their game. By the next morning, Sophia must have gotten the first set of documents. Because the next time she texted, it was different. Sophia, you filed for divorce. I didn't answer. Sophia, Noah, please, let's talk before this goes too far. I stared at the message, waiting for the familiar ache, the instinct to fix things. But it never came. Instead, I texted my lawyer. Me. Make sure she understands Jonah gets nothing. His response was almost immediate. Lawyer, trust me, she'll understand soon. I was sitting in a cafe when my phone started ringing. I glanced down. Sophia. For a moment, I considered answering. Maybe there was a part of me that wanted to hear her beg, to hear her try and justify the unjustifiable. Then I hit decline. 10 seconds later, another call. This time Marissa. I let it ring out. A minute later, a message. Marissa. Noah, I raised my daughter better than this, and I won't justify her actions. But don't you think you're being a little extreme? Extreme. I closed my eyes, shaking my head. That was exactly the problem. They didn't think I was serious. They thought I was just reacting, that eventually, I'd forgive and everything would return to normal. They thought wrong. 2 days later, my lawyer sent me an update. Jonah had been served. That same night, a message popped up. Jonah, man, come on. This is insane. You're freezing me out of the house. I smirked. Me, yes. He called. I let it go to voicemail. Then, another text. Jonah, where am I supposed to go? I stared at the screen. A dark satisfaction curled inside me. Me, not my problem. By the end of the week, everything had begun to unravel for them. Sophia wasn't just losing a husband. She was losing financial stability. Jonah wasn't just losing his best friend. He was losing the free ride he'd been enjoying for years. And I was finally taking back everything they thought they could steal. I had spent months thinking I was making sacrifices for my family. I had spent years believing I was building something solid. But I was wrong. Because in the end, I wasn't the one making the sacrifices. I was the one being sacrificed. And now, it was their turn to lose. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Freedom. And I wasn't about to waste it. I knew the moment Jonah's life started to fall apart, because the messages stopped being demanding and started sounding desperate. At first, he had tried to reason with me. Tried to talk his way out of this like he always had, thinking I'd eventually calm down and everything would go back to normal. But nothing about this was normal, because I wasn't giving him that option. By the time the reality of the legal situation settled in, Jonah was out of tricks. His first real panic message came late at night. Jonah, Noah, man, can we talk? Please. Just 5 minutes. I didn't reply. He tried again the next day. Jonah, look, I get it. You're angry. You have every right to be. But you're freezing me out of everything. I don't even have a place to stay. I read the message, took a sip of my coffee, and set my phone back down. He had a place to stay. Marissa's couch. It wasn't my problem. Word spread fast. I knew it was only a matter of time before people started realizing that Jonah, who had once strutted around with confidence, always acting like he had life figured out, was suddenly in serious trouble. Some mutual friends tried reaching out to me. Eli, dude, are you sure you want to do this? He's crashing with Sophia's mom. That's got to be humiliating. I smirked. Me good. Eli hesitated before responding. Eli, man, you're really not going to let this go, huh? Let it go? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the message. They acted like this was a petty argument. Like Jonah had borrowed my car without asking instead of destroying my entire life. Me. Would you let it go if your best friend screwed your wife and then threw a baby shower for their kid in your house? He didn't respond after that. Exactly. The moment I cut off access to the house and joint finances, Jonah must have thought he could just figure something out. Except, he never had to figure things out before. Because I was always the responsible one. Jonah was the guy who floated through life, always landing on his feet because someone else, me, usually, was there to catch him. But now, I had pulled the safety net, and he was free falling. My lawyer confirmed that the mortgage had been entirely covered by me, which meant that Jonah had no legal right to the house. And since he had no job, no income, and no real way to contribute financially, he was left scrambling, which led to the next inevitable breakdown. I was grabbing lunch at a cafe near my motel when I felt a presence hover near my table. I looked up. Jonah. He looked rough. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, his hair a mess, his usual confident posture replaced with slumped shoulders. He looked like a man who had lost everything. And he had. Noah, he said, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. Can I sit? I sipped my coffee slowly, letting him stew for a second before I gestured at the chair across from me. He sank into it, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them up. He hesitated, swallowing hard. I know I messed up. I said nothing. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with my silence. Man, you gotta believe me. I never wanted this to happen. I tilted my head slightly. You mean you never wanted me to find out? His lips pressed into a thin line. I let out a humorless chuckle. Tell me something, Jonah. What exactly were you planning? Were you just gonna let me keep paying for everything while you played house with my wife? His gaze dropped to the table. I leaned in slightly. You thought I'd be the fool forever, didn't you? He exhaled sharply. I didn't think. No, you didn't. I cut him off. You didn't think about me. You didn't think about the consequences. You thought you could take everything and not pay the price. His jaw clenched. Noah, please, he finally said. I don't have anywhere else to go. I stared at him. Jonah, the man who had stood in my house, rubbing my wife's stomach while talking about their baby, was now sitting in front of me, begging. For a second, I just watched him. Then I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the taste, and set the cup down. That's not my problem, I said. His eyes snapped up to mine. His panic was real now. Noah. I cut him off again. I have nothing left to say to you, Jonah. Whatever sympathy you think I have. I leaned back in my chair. It doesn't exist. He swallowed hard, desperation flickering across his face. You don't have to do this. I smiled. Oh, but I do. I pushed my chair back, tossing a few bills on the table, and stood up. Jonah blinked up at me. That's it. I nodded. That's it. Then I turned and walked out. And I didn't look back. Days passed. Then came the eviction notice. Jonah hadn't been able to keep up with the mounting costs. He had no real job, no way to sustain the house without me. And just like that, the place that had been my prison became his downfall. I showed up the day they were forcing him out. Boxes were scattered on the front lawn. Sophia stood to the side, clutching her belly, looking pale and exhausted. And Jonah? Jonah was arguing with the officer handling the eviction. You don't understand, he snapped. I live here. The officer shook his head. Not anymore. Jonah's head whipped around at the sound of my footsteps. The moment he saw me, his expression twisted into pure hatred. You did this, he snarled. I shrugged. No, Jonah. You did this. His hands clenched into fists. You just want to see me suffer, don't you? I smiled slightly, meeting his gaze. Yes. He let out a low, frustrated sound, running his hands through his hair. Where the hell am I supposed to go? I glanced at Sophia. Maybe your baby mama has a solution. She flinched. Jonah turned to her, waiting for an answer. She said nothing. Jonah's face crumpled. Even she wasn't going to save him. The officer stepped forward. You need to leave the property now. Jonah turned back to me, his expression shifting from rage to something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Noah, he tried again, voice quieter now. Man, please. I didn't say a word. I just watched as the reality set in. Jonah, the man who had stolen everything from me, was now left with nothing, and it was his turn to walk away. He grabbed a box, his shoulders slumped, and started down the street. And for the first time since this all began, I finally felt free. Jonah didn't bounce back. I knew that because, despite cutting off all communication, word still reached me. Friends, real ones, kept me updated, sometimes out of concern, sometimes because they just wanted to see how I'd react. Each new piece of information was a reminder that karma had finally caught up with him, and I enjoyed every second of it. Jonah had been staying at Marissa's house, which was barely an upgrade from sleeping in his car. I heard he tried getting a job, failed. He tried couch hopping, burned too many bridges. Even people who had once liked him, who had supported him, started pulling away. Why? Because no one respects a man who destroys his best friend's life and still ends up with nothing. It was poetic justice, really. Sophia wasn't faring much better. Without me, she had to rely entirely on Jonah, who had already proven himself to be useless. It didn't take long before cracks started forming. Because what happens when you take away the comfort, the stability, the security? People show their true colors. And Sophia? She finally saw Jonah for what he really was. A leech. Which is why, a few months later, I got a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. Unknown number. I left him. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling an unfamiliar sensation. Not regret. Not sadness. Satisfaction. Because I already knew who it was from. Sophia. I later found out through a friend that Sophia had dumped Jonah. And not just dumped him, she wanted alimony. I nearly choked on my drink when I heard. You're kidding, I said, shaking my head. My friend grinned. Dead serious. She claims he promised to take care of her, and now that she's pregnant, she needs financial support. I let out a sharp laugh. Jonah, who had betrayed me for this woman, was now getting played in the exact same way. The irony was delicious. And the best part? Jonah didn't have a damn penny to his name. He had thrown away everything. His friendship, his reputation, his financial stability. All for a woman who was now taking him for whatever little he had left. It was the perfect ending. Or so I thought. One night, I found myself at a bar. It wasn't the kind of place I used to go. It was quiet, low-lit, barely crowded. Just the kind of place where I could drink in peace without worrying about running into ghosts from my past. But fate had a twisted sense of humor. Because just as I was finishing my drink, I felt someone watching me. I turned. Jonah. He looked wrecked. Gaunt face, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped like he was carrying the weight of the world. He looked like a man who had lost everything. Because he had. I didn't say anything. I just lifted my glass and took another slow sip. He took it as an invitation. He sat 2 seats away from me, gripping a cheap beer like it was his last lifeline. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, he let out a low, broken laugh. You happy now? I set my glass down and tilted my head. Very. He scoffed, shaking his head. Figures. I waited. I knew he had more to say, and I was curious. Not because I cared, but because I wanted to hear it from his own mouth. The admission that he had lost. And sure enough, after a long pause, he finally sighed and muttered, She left me. I exhaled through my nose, amused. Yeah, I heard. Jonah let out another humorless laugh. Of course you did. I leaned back slightly. So? How's it feel? His fingers tightened around his beer. Like shit. I smirked. Good. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I never thought she'd do that to me. I raised a brow. Oh, really? You thought she was different? Jonah hesitated. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but cutting. Tell me, Jonah, how did your great love fall apart so quickly? He opened his mouth, then shut it. Because he already knew the answer. Because I already knew the answer. Because Sophia only wanted him when he was convenient. When he had something to offer. When he was stealing someone else's stability. But the moment he became a liability, she threw him away. Just like he did to me. And now? Now he was drowning. Noah, he finally said, his voice quiet. I held up a hand. Don't. He swallowed hard. Man, No. He blinked. I shook my head. Whatever you were about to say, save it. I don't want your apology. I don't need your regret. And I sure as hell don't want to hear your excuses. His jaw clenched. I smirked. Look on the bright side, I said. You and Sophia got what you wanted. You don't have to feel guilty anymore. Jonah let out a sharp breath. That's not funny. I shrugged. It kind of is. He stared at his drink, eyes unfocused. I lost everything, man. I lifted my glass in a mock toast. Cheers to that. He looked at me then, his expression raw, broken, and for the first time, I saw it. True regret. Not just because of where he was now, but because of where he could have been. Because if he hadn't thrown it all away, if he hadn't betrayed me, his life would still be comfortable. But he had made his choice. And now? Now, he had to live with it. I finished my drink and set the empty glass down. Then, without another word, I stood up and walked out. I never looked back. Because Jonah was nothing more than a lesson learned. And I was finally free. Jonah tried to contest his own divorce, failed. Sophia drained him for everything he had left, which wasn't much. And me? I moved on. I cut ties with everyone who had betrayed me. I bought a new place, one that had no memories, no ghosts, no reminders of a life that had once felt real. And the final, sweetest justice? Months later, Jonah tried to reach out again. One last desperate attempt. He sent a message. Jonah, Noah, I need help. I stared at the text for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Without answering. Because Jonah was dead to me. And I had never felt more alive. There's a moment after every storm where everything feels too quiet. Like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. That's what life felt like in the months after I burned everything to the ground. For the first time in years, I had no obligations. No wife to worry about. No best friend to look out for. No family breathing down my neck, telling me to forgive. It was just me. And I was finally free. I distanced myself from everyone connected to my past. The so-called friends who had known about the affair and said nothing. The family members who had tried to guilt me into staying married, like I owed Sophia something. Even my own mother, who had bought a damn gift for Jonah and Sophia's child. I was done with all of them. The only people I kept in my life were the ones who had stood by me. The ones who had called out the betrayal before I even saw it coming. And honestly, my circle was a hell of a lot smaller now. But that was fine. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surrounded by snakes. I sold the house. Not out of necessity. Financially, I was fine. But I didn't want to live in the same walls where my marriage had died. I bought a new apartment, sleek and modern, with a view of the city skyline. No memories. No ghosts. I furnished it the way I wanted. No more debating over paint colors. No more compromising on furniture Sophia liked. It was my space, and it felt right. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I should have known it wasn't over. Because people like Sophia, they don't just let go. Her first desperate attempt came through a message. Sophia, Noah, I know I hurt you. But can we at least talk? Just once. I didn't respond. She tried again. Sophia, I miss you. Please, just one conversation. Miss me? She had spent months sneaking around with Jonah. She had thrown away our marriage for him. And now that her perfect life had crumbled, she wanted to come crawling back? Pathetic. She must have finally realized I wasn't taking the bait, because the next message? It was a voice note. I debated whether to play it. Then, out of sheer morbid curiosity, I hit play. Her voice came through, shaky and tired. Noah, I know you hate me, and I deserve that. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. What happened with Jonah, it wasn't supposed to be that way. I don't know what I was thinking. I was lonely, and I made a mistake. I ruined everything, and I regret it every day. I just need you to know that. I let the message finish. Then I deleted it. I wasn't her backup plan. She had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. I should have expected Jonah to reach out again. Men like him, they never truly learn. The message came late at night. Jonah, Noah, I need help. That was it. No fake apologies. No excuses. Just desperation. I didn't respond. The next night, another one. Jonah, man, I've got nothing left. I don't know what to do. I stared at the message, tapping my fingers against the counter. For a moment, just a second, I imagined what he must look like now. Probably living off whatever scraps he could find. Probably realizing that life, without me covering for him, was a nightmare. And honestly, good. I had spent years being the safety net for both him and Sophia. Now, they could figure it out themselves. I deleted the message. Without responding. Jonah was dead to me. It wasn't enough that Jonah was ruined. It wasn't enough that Sophia had lost everything. No, the final nail in the coffin came when Jonah tried to appeal the divorce ruling. The idiot actually went to court trying to get money out of Sophia. And the judge? The judge laughed in his face. He walked out of that courtroom with nothing. No money. No house. No reputation. Just regret. And for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. Months later, I was sitting in a cafe, sipping my coffee, when I saw them. Sophia and Jonah. Not together. They weren't a couple anymore. But they were both broken. Jonah was thinner than before, looking exhausted, drained, aged. Like life had kicked him down, and he had stayed there. Sophia? She was pushing a stroller, looking miserable. And me? I was fine. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and walked past them. For a brief moment, Sophia's eyes met mine. And in them, I saw everything. Regret. Shame. A silent plea for something. Anything. I held her gaze for a second. Then, slowly, deliberately, I smirked. And kept walking. Jonah and Sophia became irrelevant. People stopped talking about them. The scandal faded. But me? I thrived. I traveled. I met new people. I lived. And best of all, I never wasted another second on traitors. Because in the end, justice had been served. And I was finally, completely free.